Welcome to Season 4 of the Photo Ethics Podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Dodd, and I'm the founder of the Photography Ethics Center. Each week, I'll be talking with an accomplished photographer about the ethics of their practice. Today, in episode number 11, we'll be talking with Brent Lewis about becoming the story. Brent Lewis is a photo editor originally from the South Side of Chicago and now living in New York City. He's the co-founder of Diversify Photo and a photo editor at the New York Times, working on the homepage and breaking news desk. Brent was a photo editor at the Washington Post on the sports desk and the senior photo editor of ESPN's The Undefeated, where he drove the visual language of the website that's based around the intersection of sports, race, and culture. Before photo editing, he was a staff photojournalist with stints at the Denver Post, the Rockford Register-Star, and the Chillicothe Gazette. Through the years, his photos have been used by the Chicago Tribune, LA Times, Associated Press, Forbes, and Yahoo News. Can we just start by you telling us a little bit about the kind of work that you do?
It's so funny because the work that I do is like kind of split in two worlds. So my 9 to 5, as I call it, my 9 to 5 was at the New York Times. I'm a photo editor over on our breaking news and a little bit of the homepage. So I spend the majority of my day looking at the homepage of the New York Times, bringing in, at any given time of the day, 30,000, 40,000 visitors, curating to make sure what they see is the news of the moment, the news of the day. For me, it's a passion of mine, just because as a one-time person that couldn't afford a subscription to the New York Times, I want to make sure that anyone that comes onto that site understands what's happening, understands what's the big news of the day, gives them enough information that although they might not be able to afford to click into the story to read everything, that they have enough information to be a conscious citizen of the world right now, to be able to be like, oh, well, I saw this happen. I saw what's going on in Ukraine. I see what's happening in Bakhmut. I see what's going on in the next town over. Just having the understanding of what's happening, to be an informed citizen of the world, even if they can't afford the subscription to do that. So for me, it's that like one vestige of freeness in the paywall. So I'm really curating images, making sure that the photographers that are working for us are getting their best work out there, and that their work's being shown to the world on a huge platform in the best way possible, in the best light, to tell the stories that they care about, that we care about. Outside of that, also assigned photographers working on amazing stories, big and small. I have one story that we just got done doing in off the coast of France about this island that once was a concentration camp. And then I also have like a boat race for some witches, quote unquote witches, that are raising money for kids. So it's a little bit of everything. So that's my 9 to 5. And then my 5 to 9 is Diversify, which is my nonprofit that was created in 2017, geared towards making sure we're highlighting and showing the works of photographers of color from across the globe. Our membership right now is 1,400 photographers from everywhere that you can imagine. And then another 200 photographers who are part of our Up Next crew that are the ones that are just on that cusp of doing amazing work, but like just need some edges smoothed out. So we're just putting resources and everything towards them, and just trying to highlight them and lift them up so they will be able to get the membership, and then they can do amazing work for publications, commercial entities, whatever it is. So those are my two roles. Those are my two hats that I wear, my 9 to 5, my 5 to 9, as I call them.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, there's something that you said about the role that the photographs play that you're curating for the homepage in ensuring that people are informed citizens of the world. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about like what it is about photography that can play that role in a really special way.
I love it. I love it. So the one thing about photography is that it's universal. You might not speak the same language as someone. You might not understand whatever text is written. You might not actually in some situations be literate or able to read but you can see an image, and that right there has the power to translate so much more. You can see an image and you can laugh. You can see an image, you can cry. You can see an image that just pulls at your heartstrings, and this just informs you to what's going on in the world around you, and that's universal. Like, as long as you have the ability to kind of see and understand what's happening in an image and connect as a human being, like, it allows you to get just that much further, to just take in that much more of the world around you and have this understanding, and that's something that photography just has this special power of doing. Like, you can be a PhD graduate, or you could just be some person working at McDonald's, but that image has that same effect on you and it translates that same way. You don't have to know what's going on with the economy or whatever theories are happening or how the interest rate's going, but like, you see someone on a food line and you're like, they need help. Something's off here. What's going on? Why? What can I do? Or I can see myself in this situation. Like, who's going to help me? It crosses over and it connects and it brings you into understanding something you might not have understood before you saw that photo, or just the way that someone else lives their life. And I think that's brilliant. And I love that power of photography because it's just so universal.
Absolutely. And something, I guess, that I say, which is like a massive cliche, and I didn't realize that I was accidentally quoting Spider-Man, but like, photography is massively powerful, right? But that comes with a responsibility. So I was wondering if you could maybe speak to the ethics of photography, and I don't know, maybe how you see that in your role as a picture editor, or how do you talk to others when you're commissioning work about ethics?
So it's really that's funny. You're not alone. I've definitely used the like great power comes great responsibility Spider-Man quote all the time. Rest in peace, Uncle Ben. When working with photographers and we're talking about just what the responsibility is with these pictures that are being created, it really comes down to the idea of like making sure that we're respecting the individuals that are part of that, who are welcoming us into their lives. And honestly, and for some of those really, really tough moments, some of the roughest moments of their lives, to allow us to tell their story. So maybe this won't happen to the next, or we can create change on a governmental structure or global structure, whatever that might be. And so just making sure the photographers respect not only the journalism and the work being created and the pictures that they're creating, but also the people that are involved. Because at the end of the day, yeah, it's cool to win some award. Yeah, it's cool to win POI, Pulitzers, all that jazz. World Press, have to give a shout out to them. But at the end of the day, we're doing this to better the world. We're doing this to help someone, to help the future, to pass this on and to create change. And so when working with photographers, it really comes down to like making sure that we're respecting the people that are allowing us into their lives, making sure that we are reporting honestly what's going on. Like, I mean, we've had so many of these conversations around ethics and what goes into a frame, what doesn't go into a frame, and why those viewpoints need to come from so many people of different backgrounds, because there are things that get left out. There's nuances that get left out. But just making sure that we're going into these scenes and we're respecting that and we're honoring that and we're really giving this viewpoint and giving this perspective in the most straight way that we possibly can. Because I feel like once we start crossing lines and we fully decide that, oh, you know what, this scene is happening over here, I'm not going to photograph this. I'm going to just photograph what's happening over here and just leave that out. You're missing half the story. You're dictating what is going to be seen, what's not going to be seen, what's going to be recorded in history, and what's not going to be recorded in history. And that's a problem. And so when you do that, it rewrites what people are going to see on the homepage. When they open it up, they're like, oh, this is what was happening in Minneapolis at that time. Like, oh, there was just fire and brimstone and everything, and it was chaos. And it was just like, no, but there's also like peaceful protests going on over here. So you got to show the whole story. And for me as an editor, like, bring me the whole story. That's my job. My job is to then take that whole story, everything that you brought, bring that back to me. And then I'm sitting down, I'm talking to reporters, I'm talking with the photographer, I'm talking with the editors above, and we're figuring out how to tell this story in the most holistic way that we can. So for me, it's always when I'm talking with photographers, it's just like, photograph everything. Photograph what jumps out to you, what leaps out to you. What was that story? What were the moments of this that you can't shake, that you can't walk away from, that you can't forget? Give me those. And from there, I'll take that. The rest of that's on me. The rest of that's on me to make sure I'm delivering that story. But go show me what that scene looked like. Go and show me what that place looked like. Take me there. Give me that, and I'll handle the rest of that. If you're documenting the world, and I want you to do that. Leave the rest to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're describing has a lot to do with impact, right? Like the impact on the world that our photographs have. And I've spoken with photographers before who've said, my job is just to shoot the pictures. The impact is sort of, that's not my role. I guess, how do you view that? Because you were saying there that, the photographers, they go and photograph the thing, and then you deal with sort of how that's going to be presented out in the world. Like, I guess, with whom does that responsibility for impact lie, and how is that negotiated between the different roles?
That's a good one. And it's funny because this is a conversation I had a lot back in like 2020, 2021 around that, because there once was many, many moons ago. I'm kidding. This was fairly recent. There was an outlet. There was an outlet, and there's only one way to get your photos out into the world. There's only one way to like publish photos and get them out. That no longer exists. You can make an image and it can go on social media and can wind up on the cover of Time magazine. It can wind up going viral, and it can change the world off of that one image. So truly, it's a bit of give and take, it's a bit of conversation that takes place. It's a bit of, on top of that, the photographers understanding of what their role is. Like if you're working for the New York Times, you're on staff, not on staff, but like you're on something from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, name it, whatever. Then yeah, there's a back and forth. I'm your backstop. Like go out, make the images, create, do no harm. And then we'll have that conversation about what did you see? What was important to you? What were the factors that like went into this that weighed on you? Or what are those moments? What are those items? What are those points of views of this story that need to be told from you? And we're going back and forth with that. We're having those conversations. I'm also talking with reporters. But also in this world, so much the photographer in their own will and their own ability can share the images that like we won't publish. Like there's been so many times, and these are never like big stake moments. But like, I'll make my edit, I'll throw something on the website, and boom, boom, that's up there. That's amazing, looks glorious. And like I pop onto a photographer's Instagram feed, and like there's 2 or 3 other photos. I'm like, oh, that wasn't in the edit. But I mean, they're yours. You can do what you want with them. But I think that can become problematic, depends on certain situations. Not saying that like I am the controller of images and I control what images go out there, because I never want to feel like a gatekeeper, although in some way I can be seen as one. But it's also on the onus of the photographer making sure that they're not pushing out images that might cause harm, that might be problematic, that might cause issues to the people that they photograph, that allow them into their space, that allow them to tell their stories. So it's a give and take, and it's all of us. It's on all of us at the end of the day. Like great power comes from great responsibility for everyone involved in this. Like Uncle Ben was talking to a bunch of us, photographers, photo editors, directors of photography. Like it's on all of us to make sure that we are not causing harm, not doing ill will or causing issues or problems for the people that allow us to tell their stories, whether that is a high and by or that's spending 6 months in someone's life in their world. So it's on all of us. It truly, truly is.
How do you handle, so you're saying like, about the care and about, if photographers are going and publishing other photographs that weren't in that edit on their Instagram, and the need to be careful in those situations and considerate about what photographs we're sharing, and maybe taking it on board why certain photographs didn't make it into that edit. But how do you? This is sort of a two-sided question, I guess. Like, how do you approach those conversations when you need to have hard ethical discussions with people? But also, how do you make sure that you're approachable to the photographers that you work with when they have concerns about ethics that they want to broach with you? Because I think there's obviously like a power dynamic there, and I think that can be quite difficult for photographers to know how to do that. So I guess sort of any advice as well on that front about ensuring that people feel able to tackle those really hard questions and conversations.
That's a good one. That's a good one. So let's see. Let's do the photographer side first. And so if someone publishes a photo on the Instagram account or something like that, I'm like, I don't know if we should let that one out. I had decisions, and we talked about this one before I even went to the point of like not publishing it. I know you felt very strong about it. Then I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to hop on the phone. We're going to drop an email. We're going to start a text thread or whatever it is, and like let's talk this out, because this is what I came down to. Maybe I didn't like push that far enough, or maybe I didn't thoroughly explain myself. And so we're going to have that conversation. We're going to have that back and forth. And the photographer at the end of the day is like, no, this is a very important photo. This is one of the most important photos. I think this really is the story. Like, I can't prevent them from doing that. And there's nothing I can do. I can speak my mind. I can give him like the complete conversation that we had in the newsroom, or the conversations I have with myself, or even managers, or whatever it might have been. But like at the end of the day, that's on them. So I can't stop anyone from publishing images. It's as long I feel like I've done my job if I at least relayed all the information and laid out everything that I've taken in from my understanding about this image, or whatever it might be. When it comes to photographers approaching me, I hope, and if any photographer feels differently about this, please let me know. But I feel like I am completely accessible. If you haven't told, I try to be very friendly and open at all moments. I tell people like reach me where you can reach me. If you can't find my email, hit me on Facebook, Instagram. If you got my number, call me, text me, WhatsApp me, whatever. Like I try to be open and accessible at all time for any conversations.
I mean, I even like stalked you across the internet to get this interview. So
Yes, exactly. As you can see, I pride myself on being open and accessible, because I know I was on the other side of that at one point in time when it's like, I don't know how to reach anyone. So, but with that being said, and with that, I hope also comes the idea that I am open for the conversation. If there's something that just rubs you the wrong way, even whether that is about an edit or a photo usage or anything like that, just bring that to me. I'm never going to be like, oh, this person's blacklisted. I can't believe you brought me an ethical conversation as part of my job. Oh, no, you're never going to work here again, kid. Like, no, not at all. Not at all. Like, I want to have these conversations because your point of view is going to be different from my point of view. And the people who are in my sphere to have the work conversation with about publishing the image might not have that background, might not have that understanding, might not be able to see this little nuance that you saw because you were there, or you lived, or there's some moment in your life that like sticks out and gives you the information. Like, so I want to have that. I mean, it's one of the greatest things. I remember I just got done chairing World Press this year, and just being in a room with photo-minded people, from photographers, editors, curators from every part of the world, and we're having these conversations, and they're pointing out nuances that went way over my head. Like I'm just a kid from the South Side of Chicago. Like I have some understanding of the world, but like not grandiose to the point where like someone coming from Africa is going to see something totally different. And like, I'm open for that. I want to have that conversation. I want to have that back and forth. And so, I mean, I feel like a lot of my colleagues in the photo areas I work with as well are also open for that, because the last thing that we want to do is, get egg on our face, to disgrace, to cause harm, to cause issues somewhere like where the Wall Street Journal is going to get dragged on Twitter because some image got published that was read differently than intended, or because there was something that we missed in that. Because, we all don't understand what we don't know what we don't know. We don't understand what we don't understand. And so having that back and forth, having that communication, taking that shot, just having a risk. Like we're co-workers. If I put you on assignment, you're with me. We both work at the New York Times at this moment, for this time period. So let's have that back and forth. Let's have that conversation. Reach out to the editor that you're working with. Like, you know what, that photo in that edit, I know why. Can we talk about why you put that in there? Let's have that back and forth. So like, just really have those conversations. Be open with that and shoot that shot. And at the end of the day, if the person responsible for getting those photos out was just like, no, this is the way that it is, at least I did what I could do. I said something, because the last thing that I know from so many times I didn't speak up or say something, and then something happened And that weighs on me. The last thing I want to be say is that like I did what I could. I tried my best. I said something. I spoke up. And if nothing changed, so be it. I did what I could do. So at least on my conscience, I can feel comfortable. I can rest at night. And in so many ways, if I then have to go back to that person I photographed, go back to that, because honestly, truthfully, the person I photographed is looking at me. They're going to be looking at me, the photographer, to be like, why did this photo get out? Or why did that happen? Or this was not the response that we were expecting for. That's on me. They don't know the person that works on 8th Avenue. They don't know the person who assigned me to do this. They probably didn't speak to that person. I'm their connect. So it allows me to go off and get in front of that. It allows me to be like, oh my God, this is happening. I'm so sorry, blah, blah, whatever. We can have that back and forth. If there's anything I can do to help in the limited capacity that I have. And so at the end of the day, it's just like really just make sure you're having those conversations. You have to have those conversations, because if not, you're going to feel like you couldn't do anything. And we always feel like we can always do something. There's something we can do. It might not change the flow. It might not change the perspective of the world, but there's something that we can do. And at least if we speak up, we can do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do you have sort of like an example of an ethical dilemma or a sort of challenge that you've encountered in your work? And could you maybe like explain how you dealt with it and sort of how you look back on it?
All right, so this is like a journalistic ethical dilemma. And so we're working on this story in Memphis, Tennessee. There was a warehouse where the working conditions were absolutely insane, just tragic. And one of the big things here was that many of the women that worked in this facility that was shipping iPhones were having miscarriages, like constantly, back to back to back. Like it was to a point where like you can see that there's a problem here because this happened multiple times over and over again. So I sent photographer Miranda Barnes down. I was like, oh my God, Miranda has this amazing portrait style and just this like really calm, collective, easygoing, for many of these women that were going through trauma that I knew Miranda had just completely could take this one with like the easiest gloves ever. So I sent Miranda down. And so we got through all the portraits and things like that. It's actually, ironically, this is about almost 4 years ago today, 5 years ago today, we're talking through the story. And so Miranda goes down, and so it's this one woman who like literally is 2 weeks, 3 weeks off having a miscarriage. And so Miranda gets her and they're talking to her, like doing down to Memphis, and we're negotiating everything. Miranda's like, hey, she's open being part of it, but she's not feeling her best. She's not feeling great right now. She hasn't taken care of herself. She hasn't done anything really to get herself together. She's still mourning the loss of her child. And she was like, the one thing that she wishes and asks for is like, could we pay for her to get her hair done? And me, I was just like, I don't see why not. But this is, this is a new territory for me. I'm like, I mean, cool, whatever. Like, yeah, let me run this up the chain. So we get one of the editors, and so I forget having to explain to this like 6-year-old white man, like A, how much it costs to get a Black woman's hair done, and B, how long that takes. And so they were like, well, I don't know, this is probably crossing some type of line. But I was like, is this really different than taking a source out for a dinner, for a steak dinner and a drink at a good restaurant to like open that door? And they were like, no, I don't think so. I think it walked that same line. And so like we did it. And from that moment, like she absolutely like lit up and was totally open for having her portrait taken to be added to the story, and had such a bond and connection with Miranda that even gave more to the reporter after this, and gave Miranda so many more quotes that she was able to add to make the story even better from that experience. So that like walks that line of like, was it something that should do? I don't know, like, debates, but like as the human being in the world, like it was the simplest thing that we could do, especially for asking someone to be part of the story that's so taxing on them.
I think that's really interesting, because this is a topic that comes up time and time again about like paying people and like, in-kind sort of contributions toward people, and, where is the line? Do you have a sort of a hard and fast, where is the line? And then at the same time, like, how transparent do you feel that you need to be with your audiences about something like that?
That's a good one. So there is a hard line. Like I would never like pay someone to be part of a story. I would never be like, oh, here's $20, and now let's get this portrait taken, or here's $20, here's some info. Like that's way too far. We're all past that line. The line, you destroyed the line, you ripped up the line, you whatever you did to the line's gone. For me, the line's always kind of been where it's almost kind of like flip it back to what they do for journalists and reporters across many different newsrooms I've worked in my life. It's always like a $25 gift or whatever it is. Like as long as it's nothing like too crazy. But for me, I am pretty much probably a little bit more conservative than others. And I'm like, I don't want to do nothing. I don't want to be any type of transactional, because by being transactional or creating some type of monetary give or take, then I'm influencing the story. I'm now part of that story. And granted, this is a somewhat fallacy that we've been so, thanks J School, that like we are not contributors in the story. We are just flies on the wall. That's an absolute insane. And I've seen that because I love throwing photographers in situations where they're not, the people might not be comfortable exactly, or the photographers might not be comfortable, but like to get people out of their comfort zones and see what that creates. But like you can easily see that. Like I've seen photographers in the spaces before. I've been in spaces before where I was like the first Black person this person's ever met. And that created a whole dynamic. So don't throw that fallacy out the window for all the J School students out there in the world that are thinking that they're just flies on the wall. You're not. You're there. You have a gigantic camera in someone's home. Anyway. But yeah, I just don't want to create some type of dynamic of give and take of that. You give me this, I'm going to give you this back. The most of that give or take is imagining that like, I'm here, I'm going to tell your story, and hopefully this does and changes something that you're going through and makes life easier for you, or make whatever this issue that we're talking about or covering makes that better for yourself and for the future. Like, I don't think Gordon Parks went into Fabio's story hoping that he would get, a brand new life and be able to come to America and like have his life completely turned upside down. I don't think anyone goes into a story thinking that. So I don't want to make promises or make guarantees. I mean, I've heard stories where like photographers set like GoFundMe's for people. That's like way too far, way, way too far in my book. It's more or less like, I am just here because this story either was assigned to me or it matters to me or I'm passionate about it. And I hope to enlighten the public about what's happening. And so I don't want to like create that give and take. I don't want to make any promises. I don't want to make anything transactional. I am here for being my most like human form. I'm not going to be like that. Once again, thanks J School. It was just like, shut off. Like I still remember this one time I was photographing this guy. He lost both his group of 3 friends, and they were like really, really tight. It was back when I was a photographer working in Chicago. And so I was photographing him right after he lost his best friends. It was 3 of them. He lost 2 of his best friends back to back, like literally like 24, 48 hours apart from each other. And I went out there like, Brent, go out and photograph him more. He wasn't even supposed to be there. We didn't know he was there. So I got out there and I'm photographing, and I meet him, and he's in tears, and I couldn't bring myself to make a photo of him crying, because like I'm hearing a story, and like for me, I also had 3 best friends. It was a trio of us. It was me and 2 of my other best friends, and so I just saw him and me like, I know he's going through, because like I can only imagine losing Lamar and CG. Like I can only imagine like losing them back to back and how devastated I'd be. And I just remember like we were talking, he was in tears, we were going back and forth. And I just hugged him. Like I feel like my J School person would probably like lose his mind. It's like, oh my God, what do you mean you're part of the story? But like, I'm a human.
A question that I also really like to ask people is like, what is a myth that you want to debunk about photography? And you've sort of touched on that a bit. So I wonder if there's anything you want to like unpack about that.
I mean, the fact, I came into this industry as like hardcore photojournalistic. You are not part of the story. You're not there. You're just there to show what's going on in the world. That's what it always has been. And that's a myth. I'm there. I'm in it. These things affect me. As a photographer, like I still remember, and I've talked to the parents of like the people that I photographed that were like murdered in the South Side of Chicago. It was in my young 20s, I was like, oh man, I'm going out South Side, I'm going out in Chicago, which I'm from, and like I'm going to hopefully one of these photos that I'll create will like stop the violence in the streets. And it didn't happen per se off those images, but like I'm part of that weighs on you. Those like the second murder, I still remember my first murder I ever photographed, but like the second, the third, the fourth, like those stay with you as much. Like we're having these conversations around guns and states, and um like I'm always like, fam, like you don't understand what these actually do to communities and to families. And so like that you're not part of the story, that this is not supposed to affect you is a lie. Like I have taken so much away from the challenging assignments, as much as I've taken away from the lighthearted fun assignments, and just seeing the beauty of the world through the eyes of kids playing in water, or a family that adopted a bunch of foster kids and gave them homes. And like, we're human. You are a human being doing this job. Like, yes, I understand that photography and journalism is supposed to be step away from each. Well, not photography journalism, but like when you're out working, you're supposed to be a step away. But like, no, you're a human being, and these things matter. These things weigh on you. You're gonna see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And like, you're not a robot. You're like, the things that you see are going to stay with you as much as you're like, oh, I got this camera. And for me, the camera's always served as this like step between, in a way that like I'm not actually here. I'm not actually in these moments. I'm taking these in, but I'm not internalizing them. No, I'm internalizing them. These moments are forever held on hard drives and in the memory of my mind of the images that were made. Even now as a photo editor, like oof, I am that shield, that step between getting those photos that like would blow your mind if you saw some of these graphical horrors of these images that I'm seeing, and that we are honestly we're that last stop between those images entering the public sphere and not. And so yeah, we're all in this. We're all humans. Don't let that be a myth. Don't let the idea that you cried coming home from an assignment, or that you cried in your car. My Honda Civic has seen me on some really, really rough days. And like, just that we're human at the end of the day. Like I don't know where that myth came from. I don't know where that analogy came from, that we are a step removed, that we're not part of the story, because we are. We are. Our presence is felt by the people that we're photographing. Our presence is there. Are these images that we're creating stick with us as much as you're like, you might have a 20-year long career, but there are moments that stick with you. There's moments that stick to your ribs. And so like we're part of it. And don't let anyone tell you any differently. Like, as much as it might be the old machismo photojournalism, like, oh, I just go home and get some scotch after my hard day covering the war. It's like, no, not at all. Like I sat there and I've talked with Yevgeny Malateka after, his amazing photo that won World Press, and like, that weighs on him. That's a part of who he is. Like, that's a part of what he understands. Like, that's a memory, that's a core memory. And if you ever see him talk about that image, you will see him get emotional, because that is someone that is in his country, that could have been someone he known, could have been his partner, could have been his sister, could have been his cousin. And so like, don't let that myth ever get you, that like you're not part of the story, that we are not humans seeing this and witnessing this as well. And I think a lot of the general public also doesn't click sometimes, no pun intended, that like these photos, someone had to take those photos. Someone's in that space. Someone is seeing what's going on in Ukraine. The bombs are going off. Like, there is someone running. Like, I think, if you ever get a moment, I don't know if people saw like the video of like Lindsay Odario taking like that photo of the bombing taking place. Like, she's in it. She's in that. Feel your feelings. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you soft. It doesn't make you the less than person in these situations, because we have to process it. Yeah, just be human, be real, be understanding.
I think that's a really interesting point about how people, like the general public, maybe when they're looking at photographs, aren't thinking about the person who made the photograph. And I don't know, I think it sort of goes into this conversation a little bit about like representational responsibility, but also being like a responsible viewer, but also like, how do we cultivate responsible viewership? And I guess as like a photo editor, you have a lot of like power in that process. I don't know. I don't really know what my question is necessarily there, but I guess how do we view, in particular, photographs of situations of trauma responsibly or ethically, or how do we show those in a responsible or ethical way?
Okay. All right. No, that's great. And honestly, almost ties back into like our Instagram conversation earlier, because it really is the one thing I loved about the growth of like images being disseminated across the internet right now is that the general population is more acute and more adept and understands images, maybe not fully on the creation level as much, but they understand they can speak about them better than I think we could in any part of human history, to really understand what the power of an image has. I feel like thanks to Instagram, good or bad, that's for you to decide, that people understand the power of photography, the power of the image, and how much that power holds. I mean, we go back to the days of like when Frederick Douglass was, like, I want to be the most photographed person, make sure that image disseminates out there in the world. He understood the power of images. I feel like a lot of people now have that understanding, which is great. Which is, I feel like, for the career and the jobs that we do, like that is amazing that people can speak about images and understand the power that they hold. I think when it comes to viewers, crazy enough, from responses of many of things that did like upset me, that even before I could get a chance to respond back to a newsroom or reach to a colleague photo editor or raise a point, like the internet, Twitter is already going crazy, or X, is already like having those conversations. And so people are engaged, people are seeing that more. And I feel like it's amazing because once going back and forth, like going back to like citizen of the world, informed citizens, like people are doing that. Like it's really beautiful to see. I remember like, I'm gonna go back to 2020 and I'm gonna talk about that. Let's go back to 2020. Like just the way that like folks are being shown in Minneapolis and how Black and brown folks out there protesting in the streets are being seen, and like people could like see like, oh, well, this photo looks like it's wartime, but also this photo taken by a Black photographer, it reads differently. Something, there's a nuance in here that I'm not seeing from this like war correspondent that's on the ground there. Even to the idea of like who's making those images. I remember, this is funny, I love this. Back when like Black Panther was premiering, which was like the ultimate height of like Blackness in 2016. Like there was never anything Blacker than that. I remember I did like this, it's still a tweet at that time, just like laying out all of the magazine covers and newspapers that like hired everything but Black photographers to capture these images, to show these images. And I never forget, at that time period, I'm posting that, like you get some response from people. And then I would also get like some people reposting, like, I'm finna go out and buy all these. And I was just like, that kind of defeats the purpose of what we're doing here. But like folks are not aware. Like fast forward a few years, was that 6 years ago, 7 years ago? Fast forward 7 years, people are now like looking at who the photographers are that are making these images. Like, so those same people, I wonder if today, if they're well aware of it, but they're seeing and they're understanding that now. So that has been like a jump in the last few years that I've been like watching and seeing, and it's really amazing. So I think, we continue to honestly making sure that we are relaying like who are the photographers that are telling these stories, who are the photographers making these images, what are they doing, highlighting them, making sure that we're showing the people behind it. Because if you're not informed, if you're not looking for that, if you're not seeing those names, you're like, oh, okay, it's just a meal. Like someone's out there doing something, but it's fine. But like when you humanize who's out there and you personalize them and highlight them, it shows that much more. and you begin to connect these dots, and it really informs the readers, from my point of view, to who's out there, who's the person telling us, or who's responsible for giving me this point of view or this, and whose point of view am I getting it from? And so that's one of the things, like, once again, go to bed, that I love seeing from like the rise of images being disseminated as far and wide as they are, because yeah, you get the superstars that come out of that, Tyler Mitchell's, Devin Allen's, but like you also get people just being more aware. And so I think that's heightened the conversation around photography, photographs, what they mean, the power that they have, the influence that they have, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm conscious that you have so much experience from like so many different sort of corners of the industry, you know, from being a photographer and being a photo editor and then being the jury chair at World Press Photo this year. So I'm conscious there's a lot of ground that we haven't been able to cover, but is there anything that I should have asked but didn't?
Ooh, we haven't talked about Chicago very much. I'm kidding. Chicago. But no, I think
I'm from St. Louis, so as long as we don't talk about the Cubs, I guess we're
exactly.
okay.
Yeah, no, we're okay with the Cubs. I'm a White Sox fan, so it's fine.
Okay.
But we don't talk about that other team. They're over there. But I think, the one thing, we talked about it a little bit, because like my whole thing is, diversity and making sure that like people are being represented. And we spoke about that a bit. I got into it a little bit, and just coming back to the idea that making sure we are being aware of just the influence that someone's understanding of life and the life that they lived and the life that they've experienced brings to the images that they are creating. And whether that is documentary, because there's nuances that you're going to see, there's little pieces of this that you're going to catch, there's ideals that might floor you and interest you that others might not see, or might just be mundane to the next eye. Like that brings so much into the story. Or like even when you're doing a portrait, and just the way that you're having those conversations, that back and forth with the person that you're photographing, like those are all part of that. There's just so much that goes into it. And I feel like if we are not working with photographers that understand the communities that we're photographing and providing those opportunities and those chances to really tell those stories from a point of view that gets it, are we really telling those stories? Can we call ourselves like ethical photojournalists? Because are we really documenting the stories correctly? Or are we having someone bringing their life skills and life understanding from a world that doesn't understand this world to tell the story here? It really comes down to like, are we fully telling that story? Are we fully grasping everything? And I think, once again, there is room from outsiders to tell the stories, but there's also needs to be room for insiders to tell that story. And there's so much to it, and there's so much nuance missed when you're not doing that. So yeah, there's a lot there, but really we need to make space to allow folks to tell their own stories, because honestly, that is when we're getting something that no one has seen before. And it comes out. Like I can point examples, but I'm not going to do it right now, because if I start pointing examples right now, I wouldn't remember which ones. But there are tons out there. You know them, maybe you've seen them. And then there's also amazing stories that came from outsiders telling the stories about a community they've never heard before. So we just need to give the ability to see stories from both sides. The insider-outsider approach works, but only if we have both.
Just to follow on from that, like, you said that we need both, but I guess the responsibilities of the outsider photographer are different from the responsibilities of the photographer from inside a community. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit about, like, if you are photographing something from an outside perspective, how do you do that responsibly?
Oh, great. No, so honestly, the responsibility when it comes to that, how to do that respectfully, is go in curious, go in asking questions. Don't go in with the mindset of like, oh, well, this is going to be this way. Make sure it looks this way. You don't know. You have no idea. This is not your lane. This is not your space. You're not from here. Like, go in curious, go in asking questions, go in understanding, talk. Don't be afraid. Don't be a step back. Like, really, like, lean in. If this is a story, if this is a community that you want to spend time with that. Be steeped in it. Honestly, that's the only way to properly tell that story. Like, you can't bring your own outsider like thoughts to it. Like, yeah, like we all go into stories and ideals. We're like, okay, we have this one frame, but be prepared to walk in and get a whole different story, to tear that whole idea you had up and shred it and throw it away. Be prepared for that and be open for that. Like, don't go in looking for that story that you're imagining is there and you find out that it's not there, but you have this set in your mind. Let that go. That is your responsibility to have those communications, talk to people, go back and forth, understand, read, do your background information gathering, whatever it takes. Like, really don't go in with this preconceived idea of what this is going to be, because it might not be. And so if you go in defensive, you go in like, oh no, this is what it has to be because I saw this on this, I don't know, Fox News presentation or something like that. Like, this is what it is. Like, that's not it. So like, go in open and considerate, compassionate, and like, let the story go where the story goes. Like, you're not guiding this. You're not Scorsese. You're not a director. I guess we can't go back to being a fly on the wall. You're just here to take this in. Now my J school teacher's like, haha, I told you. But like, just be here for it. Just be open for it, because that's your responsibility. If this is a story that you know nothing about, that you want to learn about, this is how we're doing it. We are learners. We are taking in information, and that's what you should do in these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that makes a lot of sense. And then the last question that I like to ask everyone is, what does photography ethics mean to you?
Photography ethics to me means to just bear witness. Let's not change anything. Don't have ideals of what things are going to be or what it is. Just show what life is. That's the beauty of what we do. Like, we're not here to create in the grant. There are people that like create fictional lands and things like that. But in the role of documentarian, like, I just want to see what life is. I want to see that person next door lives like, and how that communicates to me and how I see what they're going through. That makes me understand life that so much better. I want to see the person that is 20,000 miles away and what their life looks like, and how at the end of the day, we both want the same thing. We both want to be happy. We both want love. We both want compassion. We both want that freedom, that ability to breathe and to live. So photography ethics at the end of the day mean to just show me that reality. Show me what's happening in the world, and do just that. Do no harm, go no above and beyond. Just give it to me straight.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Photo Ethics Podcast. The aim of this podcast is to share new insights about photography ethics with others. So if you heard something you liked, please share this podcast with someone who would appreciate it. You can also rate and review us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Join me next week when we hear from Fred Richin about photography for a better world. In each episode of the podcast, we ask our guests, what does photography ethics mean to you? This is a question that everyone in the photography industry should be able to answer. That's why the Photography Ethics Center is asking you, our listeners, to commit to writing and publishing your own statement of ethics. Visit www.photoethics.org/ethics to learn more and to make the pledge committing to ethical transparency, accountability, and awareness. That's www.photoethics.org/ethics.